Imagine you finally win your freedom from a tyrant. You've seen the sea split, you've walked on dry land, and the chains are finally off your wrists. Then, the very first thing you do with that freedom is take off your gold jewelry and melt it down to build a new prison. In Exodus 32, we find one of the most baffling scenes in ancient history, the golden calf. Most of us have seen the movies or read the Sunday school version. We think of it as a story about some rebellious people who just couldn't stay focused for 40 days. But what if the golden calf wasn't just a statue? What if it was a desperate survival mechanism for a mind still trapped in a slave mentality? Today, we're looking at Exodus 32 as the most misunderstood identity theft in history. We're going to peel back the layers of what was actually happening at the foot of Mount Sinai and see why this story is less about ancient statues and more about the modern mirrors we look into every single day. You might be thinking, I don't own a golden cow. I don't bow down to wood or stone. How does this apply to me? The truth is, we are all experts at identity theft. We take our worth, the thing that makes us us, and we hand it over to things that cannot love us back. We give our identity to our careers, our bank accounts, our social media metrics, or even our children's success. When those things fail, when the market crashes or the relationship ends, we don't just lose an object, we lose ourselves. That's what happened at Sinai. The Israelites didn't just break a rule, they lost their minds because they hadn't yet learned how to be free. If you've ever felt like you're working yourself to death to prove you're valuable, or if you feel like you're constantly performing to keep God happy, this story is for you. To understand the crash, we have to understand the climb. Moses is up on Mount Sinai. He's been gone for nearly 6 weeks. To us, 40 days is a long vacation. To a group of former slaves sitting in a literal wilderness, 40 days is an eternity. Remember, these people spent 400 years in Egypt. In Egypt, gods were visible. They were stone, they were gold, they were predictable. You fed the idol protected the land. Suddenly, their leader, the only bridge they have to this invisible, terrifyingly powerful God, is gone. The mountain is covered in smoke and fire. There's no mail service. There's no checking in notification. The text says, when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron. Notice that word, delayed. In Hebrew, the word carries a sense of shame or confusion. They felt abandoned. And when humans feel abandoned, we don't usually wait, we manufacture. We create something to fill the silence. In the Bible, we usually use the word sin as a catch-all term. But the Hebrew language is much richer than that. There is a specific word often used in the context of rebellion like this, pasha. Most people think sin is just missing the mark, like an archer hitting the wrong ring on a target. That's chada. But pasha is different. It's a transgression that is better described as a willful breach of relationship. It's the word you'd use for a treaty being torn up or a marriage covenant being spit upon. When the Israelites built that calf, they weren't just messing up. They were committing identity theft against God and themselves. Look at what they said in Exodus 32 verse 4, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Think about the sheer psychological gymnastics required to say that. They were wearing the gold they got from Egypt, looking at a statue they just made with their own hands, and attributing their miraculous salvation to a hunk of metal that didn't exist 48 hours ago. That is the essence of pasha. It's a deliberate choice to replace a person with a project. We do this when we decide that our hustle is what provides for us, rather than God. We take the gold, the talents and resources God gave us, and we credit the calf, our own effort. It's a breach of trust that turns a child of God back into a slave to their own creations. Why a calf? Out of all the things they could have built, why a baby bull? Scholars often point to Apis, the Egyptian bull god of fertility and strength. For 400 years, the Israelites watched the most powerful empire on earth bow to bulls. Bulls represented power you could see. They represented getting things done. Even though they were physically out of Egypt, Egypt was still very much inside them. This is the slave mentality. A slave feels the need to see the master to know what to do. A slave needs a physical representation of authority to feel secure. They weren't ready for the God of the silence. They wanted a God they could manage. The tragedy of Exodus 32 is that they traded the glory of the unseen for the safety of the seen. When we struggle with our identity, we do the same thing. We look for calves in our lives, measurable, visible metrics that tell us we're okay. If I have this much in my 401k, I'm safe. If I have this many followers, I'm loved. We are using our freedom to build gold-plated versions of our old anxieties. The calf was a way to bring God down to their level so they didn't have to rise to his. True identity is found in looking up at the mountain, even when it's covered in clouds. False identity is found in looking down at what our hands can shape. This is the part of the story that most people miss, and it's the most beautiful part. If you read the book of Exodus in order, something amazing happens. While the people are at the bottom of the mountain making a mess, what is God doing at the top? From Exodus 25 all the way through chapter 31, God is giving Moses the blueprints for the tabernacle. Think about the timing. Before the first gold earring was even tossed into the fire, God was already designing the place where he would forgive them. He was drawing up the plans for the altar, the mercy seat, and the priest's robes while they were still in the middle of their rebellion. This reveals a profound spiritual truth: God's solution for your failure is always older than your sin. In the tabernacle, God uses the same materials, gold, silver, and fine linens, that the people used for the calf. But in the tabernacle, those materials are used to invite them into a relationship, not to keep them in a cycle of performance. God wasn't surprised by the golden calf. He didn't see it and say, "Oh no, I need a plan B." He was already providing the way back before they even knew they were lost. This destroys the idea that we have to fix ourselves before we can come back to God. If God waited for the Israelites to be perfect, he never would have given them the tabernacle plans. He gave them the cure while they were still catching the disease. That is the ultimate defense against identity theft, knowing that your status as beloved isn't based on your performance at the foot of the mountain, but on the plans God made at the top. When God tells Moses what's happening below, there is a terrifying moment where God says, "Let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, but of you I will make a great nation." Exodus 32 verse 10. This was a test for Moses. God was offering to make Moses the new Abraham. He was offering Moses a legacy without the headache of these rebellious people. But look at Moses' response. He doesn't take the deal. He reminds God of his own reputation and his promise to the ancestors. And then, in one of the most radical verses in the Bible, Moses asks God to blot him out of the book if he won't forgive them. Moses stands in the gap. He becomes a type or a shadow of what Jesus would eventually do. Jesus didn't just offer his life for good people, he offered his life for people who were currently, actively building golden calves. When you feel like you've blown it, when you realize you've been chasing a false identity for years, remember that you have an intercessor who isn't interested in a new nation without you. He's interested in bringing you back into the real one. How do we practically stop the identity theft in our own lives? How do we walk away from the calf? 1. Identify your gold. The Israelites used their Egyptian wealth to build the idol. What are the gifts, talents, or resources God has given you that you are currently using to build your own security? Is it your intellect? Your appearance? Your work ethic? Acknowledge that these are gifts from the mountain, not gods of the valley. 2. Embrace the delay. Most idols are built in the waiting periods of life. When God seems silent, or when the answer is delayed, that is the moment of greatest temptation to manufacture your own solution. Practice sitting in the silence. Remind yourself that God's silence is not his absence. 3. Look at the tabernacle, not the calf. Stop focusing on how much you messed up. The Israelites could have spent the rest of their lives staring at the ground where the calf was ground into powder. Instead, God told them to look at the tabernacle. Focus on the grace that was prepared for you before you ever failed. The story of the golden calf is often told as a warning about how bad we can be. But if you look closer, it's actually a story about how good God is. It's a story about a God who stays on the mountain even when we're dancing around a statue. It's about a God who values our identity so much that he's willing to let us fail, just so he can show us that his love isn't something we can earn, and therefore, it's not something we can lose. Your identity isn't something you build out of gold. It's something you receive from the one who made the gold in the first place. If this deep dive into Exodus 32 helped you see the Bible, and yourself, a little differently today, I'd love to hear from you. Which golden calf are you currently trying to leave behind? Drop a comment below. It helps us build a community of people learning to walk in freedom together. And if you want more clear, simple explanations of these deep spiritual truths, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're on a journey to find the heart of God in every chapter of his story, and I'd love for you to join us. Thank you for watching. Remember, the mountain is still there, the fire is still burning, and his grace is still older than your sin. We'll see you in the next video.